Hi, I'm Clark Dennis Cundiff, and honored and privileged to be the pastor at Bay Lake United Methodist Church at 4300 Shore Drive in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and coming to you on Sunday, March 21st with our sermon as we continue to move through our Lenten study of Disciple Like Jesus. And we're trying to learn how to disciple like Jesus so that we can understand the definition of discipleship, that it is a response to God's loving invitation, that a disciple is a follower of Jesus Christ who is committed to belonging to the body of Christ. We talked about how that was in worship and hospitality, becoming more like Jesus with a life open to God and a life of obeying God. And today's segment is that last piece is blessing the world through service and through generosity, blessing the world through service and generosity. And I remember one of my first mission trips, going on a mission trip, and I thought, well, this would be kind of fun to kind of go off and help other people. And I've always enjoyed helping people my entire life, and I always loved doing that. And I went on my first mission trip, and it was a lot of work, but it was awesome. And every mission trip I've done since, every participant, including myself, always comes out with, I got more out of this than I think the people we helped. Whether it's putting a handicap ramp on a house that needed it for a person's coming home is going to be wheelchair bound the rest of their lives. Or helping houses in North Carolina 2 years ago because of COVID. 2 years ago, we had a group of guys from our church go down to eastern North Carolina where several hundred homes had been flooded, and worked with several homes that week with the owners, cleaning them out and getting them rebuilt. And one of them, we actually helped finish the last little piece of the installation in the basement. But it was always, everyone always shares, well, how much it is a privilege to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ, to help another. And when we think about service and generosity, Phil Maynard, Phil and Eddie Pipkin, who wrote the book Disciple Like Jesus, we're using as our resource, talks about the difference between service and generosity. And service is helping that person, engaging with that person. And that generosity, which is equally important, is giving of the blessings. Live in such a way that we can give out of our abundance to help those who are in need. And most often churches might confuse the two, and you ask them how they do in service, and they'll say, just like at Bay Lake, we do the beach bags. Well, we buy the food, we pack them. We do pack them, but we don't engage with the people. You have to drop them off at the school, and then the families come pick them up. So it's kind of generosity. We're doing quarterly food baskets from where we used to do them just at Christmas and Christmas and Thanksgiving. And again, that's more of a generosity, right? Even Operation Christmas Child, we pack the boxes, but we don't get to see the faces of the children except for through some videos. So that's generosity. So they're both equally important: service, engaging with people, and generosity to do that. So let's take a couple of minutes and kind of look at both of those to see. And one of the ways we can learn how best to be in service is to understand that we do have spiritual gifts. You have spiritual gifts. The Bible tells me so. 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 11 talks about that there's the same spirit that we have, and that each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. And to one is given the spirit of wisdom, another knowledge, another faith, another healing. So that we have these different spiritual gifts. So one way to help us understand how best to serve is to understand, what are my spiritual gifts? And there are several options online to do a little inventory of your spiritual gifts. And he talks about one that Rick Warren uses at Saddleback Community Church, and he has the acronym SHAPE, S-H-A-P-E, and S is for those spiritual gifts. And H is for heartstrings, like kind of your passion. What tugs at your heartstrings? What are your interests, your passions? A is for abilities. We have natural abilities that we can give to God through service to other people. What is our personality? Is our personality more, we like to work with a group of people, or we enjoy working more by ourselves or with one or two people instead of a group? And experiences. Our life experiences can help people in so many different ways. So if we're looking for service opportunities, we can do stuff like fix a dinner, fix a meal for a family that's in need. or we can take the neighbor to the doctor, or we can rake the neighbor's leaves, right? I was one of my neighbors in one of the parsonages lived in, I was so excited when my neighbor helped me rake leaves because we had tons of trees and tons of leaves. And what a gift of service for that person to do that. Or maybe helping a friend move. I knew a time in my life I felt like I was a mover. I helped so many of my friends move from apartment to apartment. But you're engaging with the individuals when you do that. I've been parts of churches where we supported a Habitat for Humanity. And we went and worked and built the house and was able to help fundraise Generosity for the supplies, but then actually did the building. And we work with the owner because the owner puts in some sweat equity as well. Mentoring a high school student. These are ways we can be in service. Remember Micah 6:8, that we're to act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with our God. And then as we look at this in the viewpoint of service, then mercy ministries and justice ministries come out of that. Mercy addresses the symptoms, the needs of those outside the church, and justice addresses those that create those symptoms or needs. So it's more systemic, more broad. So some examples of mercy could be just providing for shelter, for food, for clothing, for medical care, the basic needs that we have. But then justice would be more like discipling someone, more like tutoring someone. You know, the idea of you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. Training, job training, creation, helping them purchase their first home. Changing an ordinance that's creating an unfair burden on a part of the population. So those immediate needs are the mercies, and the larger societal and institutional issues are kind of more the justice mercies. And with all that, we walk humbly with our God, right? In humble humility. So the challenge around service is find a way to serve in your local church where you get to make a contribution to the life and ministry of your congregation. Maybe do a spiritual inventory, spiritual gifts inventory to see what your spiritual gifts, to see what your passion is and what your ability is, your personality, your experiences, and how that may lead into how God's calling you to serve. And most importantly, is to find a way to serve, right? Find a way to serve. So that second piece of blessing the world is generosity. Generosity flows out of the understanding that God is the provider of all things. All things come from God. Everything I have is God's, right? Everything I have is God's. And that we are stewards of those gifts that God gives us, stewards of the earth that we've been blessed with. And as the owner, God has the right to everything we have. And as stewards, we are accountable to God for their responsible use. So in a sense, generosity is it's a spiritual issue, right? God gave all things to us. They're all given from God. And God asks us to be good stewards of those gifts. Even back in the Old Testament, they talk about how we are supposed to provide for others. Leviticus 19:9 and 10 says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of the field or gather the gleaning of the harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. So live within margins, right? So I want to live in a way that I'll have not only to work to give the tithe, the 10% the Old Testament talks about giving 10% back to God. And I'll talk more about it in a minute. But to live in such a way that I can handle a need from a family member. Or there was a time when my parents needed some help because my dad had knew something was wrong and it took him a couple of years to diagnose. He had Parkinson's. So I was able to help them because I had abundance. I wasn't spending all that I made until they got the disability and was covered for that. So we are called to live within our margins so we can give to those who are in need. Because God wants us to be thankful. Enter his thanks with thanksgiving, his courts with praise, Psalm 104. Contentment. Remember Paul says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength, Philippians 4:12. And compassion, Mark 25:37 through 40. Remember the goats and the sheep? You want to be a sheep? Bah, not a goat. But he separates the sheep from the goat because the sheep fed the hungry, clothed the naked, visited them when they were sick or in prison. And they said, when? And they said, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And the goats didn't do it. He said, when do we not, Lord, do it to you? He says, when you don't do it to the least of these, you don't do it to me. To have that compassion. And to take care of other people. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10:35. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for even any extra expenses. Not only did he care for the wounded person on the side of the road when he was a Samaritan and this person was Jewish, but he took him to the inn, paid for the inn, said, if there's any more, I'll pay when I come back. Generosity. So sometimes you hear this word affluenza. It's a term we've used for a number of years. It's kind of a confluence of the word affluence and influenza, because I don't talk about influenza these days, but the idea is that we kind of are affluent and we get infected with what affluence can bring. And it's materialism, finding value in stuff, Lord help me. Consumerism, longing for more stuff, keeping up with the Joneses, right? An easy debt, the ready access to resources to buy more stuff, right? Because I mentioned a few minutes ago, God is saying in the Old Testament, do 10%. And the image of apples, I like, here's 10 apples that God gives us, and we're asked to give 1 apple back and live off the other 9 apples. Or, even as John Wesley did, to live off maybe only 4 apples and give the other 6 away, as he lived off the same salary all his life, even as his income increased and gave the balance to God. So it is moving from spoon, feeding myself, to ladle, feeding other people. That I want to be generous not only in monetary stuff, but in my time, in service, and giving to others. So the challenge is to find a way to give of your resources, to give of your time, energy to in your local church, to reach out into the community, see where their need is. Maybe there's kids that need tutoring. Maybe not in math. Actually, I did pretty good in math. Maybe. English, I was an English major. But help ways you can tutor other people, help be in service. Take a course in biblical principles. We're currently finishing up, I think this Sunday, coming up, financial peace. Biblical way to be a good steward of your financial resources so that you can make all you can so you can give all you can. Provide for a need in your community. See what their need is out there. See if you can provide it. And just as I mentioned, when you do these things, it just resonates with my soul that I can help. It's like there's nothing more enticing than somebody in need that I think I can help. And I can go and help and have that sense of purpose and worth and value. Remember the widow's mite? Luke 21, 1-4. He looked up and saw rich people putting their gifts into the treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on. Help someone in need this week. In service, engaging with a person, in generosity. Carry that extra bill around with you. Look for someone in need to give it to. And reap the benefit not only here, but hereafter of helping one another and being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. May God bless you. Have a great week. Be safe. Hope you'll join us for our daily devotions, our Sunday 11 a.m. in person with mask and distancing, or on Facebook Live and YouTube. God bless. Bye-bye.